question to the audience. Just raise your hands to this. How many of you have a spare bedroom? Just a bedroom that's sitting empty. All of you should be taking that spare bedroom and putting it on Airbnb like right now.
If not, we'll do it. Sean's gonna come to our house and...
What are you guys thinking? Let's make this money. You don't have to have a 6-bedroom mansion in West Vancouver to make over 100 grand on Airbnb. You could take a 1-bedroom anywhere, Kitsilano, downtown, Burnaby, I don't care where it is. Design it well, make sure you have good photos, you'll make 6 figures, no question. The crazy thing was, because I want to make sure this story is as relatable as possible, right? This isn't a story of some rich kid or some super genius. No, like I'm like everyone else in this room. I actually moved into my parents' house. Now here's where it gets really crazy. I started Airbnb-ing the basement of my parents' house. Okay, now like we talk about monetization, this is gonna get crazy.
I remember staying at an Airbnb before, so I was like, I'm gonna list my parents' bedroom without their permission on Airbnb and see how it goes.
Did you give them their cut?
No. I didn't make that. I probably should have.
Shrewd businessman over here.
Without further ado, I'd like to introduce Sean and Ari. Welcome to the stage. All right, so why don't you guys quickly introduce yourselves? Like in the Airbnb world, how are you guys currently involved in the Airbnb space?
Sure, thanks Tom. Thank you for organizing this event. So with Ari and I, we own a business called Iconic Retreats. We have 24 properties at the moment. We also just recently started a coaching program as well, Tenants, doing about $150,000 a month, just our own company. So that's how we're involved in the Airbnb business. What I would say is different about us versus every other Airbnb manager or Airbnb company is we do one thing very well. We sell experiences versus everyone else that's on Airbnb, they're trying to sell beds. We're selling experiences. And we can get into more depth into that, but I'll let Ari introduce himself as well.
I'm Ari, and Sean and I, we have Iconic Retreats and 10x B&B, and the Airbnb journey, for lack of a better word, has been very interesting. But I think you know what, Sean? Why don't you start with telling them how you got into the journey? I think probably let's do a little introduction on that.
Yeah, please.
Yeah.
Okay. Let me give you guys some context how I got into Airbnb. The short answer is I wanted free rent. As we all know, rent is very expensive in Vancouver. Now, just for context, so I had a finance degree from UBC. I had a 6-figure banking job. I was in commercial banking, managing a portfolio worth $180 million. I thought I had made it, but in fact, I hadn't made it. I still felt dead broke. I was actually living on UBC campus post-graduation. My rent was $1,400 a month. I was still supporting my parents who lived in BC housing. So I was trying to figure out, man, like how do I move to downtown Vancouver, right? Because that's when you know you've made it, right? You want to move.
Richmond, you gotta go downtown.
Yeah.
That's the place.
And I grew up in Coquitlam. So I grew up in Coquitlam, BC housing and welfare. So not from money at all, just literally dead broke. So I was trying to figure out, okay, how do I get out of UBC campus and move to downtown? But I couldn't afford it because I was still helping my parents. So one day I'm at a concert and a friend of mine who I know made less money than me.
Sean, what concert were you at?
Imagine Dragons.
Yeah. I'm pretty sure it was Shawn Mendes, no?
No. It was definitely Imagine Dragons. So here's the crazy thing. I'm at this concert with my friend. He only makes 40 grand a year, and he's telling me, hey, I live in a sub-penthouse in downtown Vancouver. And I'm like, wait a sec, I make 6 figures at the bank. You make 40 grand, but you live in a sub-penthouse? I still live on UBC campus. So I was like, okay, well, what are you doing? And he told me about Airbnb. So what he would do is Monday to Friday, it's called house hacking. Monday to Friday, he would list the sub-penthouse on Airbnb, on the weekends, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, he'd list it on Airbnb. Monday to Friday, he'd live in the Airbnb. And he was actually living there for free. That was the initial inspiration for Airbnb.
Which year was this, by the way?
This is in 2017. So this was the light bulb moment for me. I was like, okay, this guy makes less money than me, and he's living in a sub-penthouse. I could do the same. So I went and found a property in Cole Harbour, a 3-bed, 2-bath. And what I did was 2 things, house hacked and did rental arbitrage. So I got the landlord's permission to do Airbnb in the property. And there was 3 bedrooms in the property. I went and lived in the smallest bedroom on the property, the smallest bedroom. And I put the master bedroom as one listing and the smallest bedroom as a separate listing. And I was actually sharing one of the bathrooms with one of the guests. And obviously the master bedroom had a private bathroom. So master bedroom I was listing for $150 a night. The smallest bedroom I was listing for $65 a night. And not only was I living there for free, but I was actually making surplus income. So I was, okay, this is pretty cool. And the next step was, okay, what if I just put the entire property on Airbnb? That's when it got really crazy. Because when we hit August of that year, I was making over $1,000 a night. I was making over $1,000 a night. And that was the real light bulb moment for me. So with all the money I was making, I then went and actually purchased a property for my parents in Maple Ridge with only a $30,000 down payment. Nothing crazy. $30,000 down payment, moved my parents out of BC Housing into a house of their own in Maple Ridge. And I started thinking, maybe I should replicate this process. Why don't I go get more properties? So I went and got my second property, continued doing Airbnb. By that point, we were at $290,000 revenue just off 2 properties. 2 properties, $290,000 revenue, and I still had a full-time job. And that's when I got Ari into the picture. Maybe Ari can explain what we did from there.
So yeah, I was working in healthcare. It was a grind. Loved what I did, but I just remember one day Sean gives me a call and he's like, "Listen, stop what you're doing. I gotta tell you something." And I'm like, "Is your girlfriend pregnant? Like, what's going on?" You're like, what kind of news do I need to stop? And I'm like, "Okay, this is serious." I go and I take the call. I sit outside on my break and I'm like, "So tell me what's up." He's like, "Listen, you need to get in this thing called Airbnb with me." And I'm like, "Oh yeah, you mentioned this to me. You're at a Shawn Mendes concert. You were like talking to some guy. You're gonna be like 2 nights of the week renting it out and then back to UBC." I'm like basically like what do you call these people? A transient. Yeah, a transient. That's the right word. And I was thinking to myself, I'm like, I don't really want to do that. Like, I'll be honest. Like, I like sleeping in my own bed, 7 days of the week. But eventually he started talking and I started listening more. And I was like, okay, hang on. You made how much? You're doing how much per month? You're growing by how many properties? And he's like, "Listen, come, let's meet, let's figure this out and get in." So that kind of was like the spark that started things off between us and got me into the business. And, obviously Sean and I, we've known each other since first year university at UBC. And, we come from similar backgrounds, the immigrant story, family struggles to get here, give up everything they ever known. And, we had a lot of connections and synergies that when we first met, we both got full rides to UBC, never took a dime from our parents. We're helping our parents after graduation. So, I said, okay, leap of faith, trust. And that was kind of the beginning of my journey in Airbnb with Sean's unbelievable story. Yeah.
Dude, you guys are really good speakers.
Why, thank you.
You look really nervous down there, but you got up here. You, Sean. Yeah, you look really. I was looking at you but man, that was such a good story. I love it. Keep talking, I guess.
Yeah, sure. So the story gets a little bit crazy. So I'm a very, very frugal person. Again, coming from a broke background, super frugal. So
I can confirm.
Yeah, and so the crazy thing was, because I want to make sure this story is as relatable as possible, right? This isn't a story of some rich kid or some super genius. No, I'm like everyone else in this room. So what happened was we had grown to 13 properties. I was still working full-time at the bank. I went from Scotiabank to RBC at that point, still in commercial banking. I actually moved into my parents' house. Now here's where it gets really crazy. I started Airbnb-ing the basement of my parents' house. Okay, now, we talk about monetization, this is gonna get crazy. So the downstairs of my parents' house, the basement, has 3 bedrooms. So I put that on Airbnb and that was crushing. That was paying off the mortgage and making surplus income. I started living upstairs with my parents. Okay, so I'm in my mid to late 20s at this point. Living upstairs with my parents and my younger brother, but there's only 2 bedrooms upstairs. There's only 2 bedrooms. So I blew up an air mattress and I was living in the living room. We had 13 properties. I had a 6-figure job and I was living with my parents. And so one day I was talking to a friend of mine. He's like, man, what are you doing? Like, you're making a lot of money. Maybe you should move to downtown Vancouver at this point permanently and stop Airbnb-ing everything. And I said, okay, yeah, maybe that's not a bad idea. So finally, that's when I actually moved to downtown Vancouver, and I didn't Airbnb that property. I actually lived in the property. I did not Airbnb it, I promise.
Although you did think about Airbnb that property
mainly
too.
because the building didn't allow it.
And luckily, yeah.
For full transparency, I definitely did think about it. What was amazing was this, guys. The moment I moved to downtown Vancouver, and I didn't have to commute from Maple Ridge anymore, it freed up so much of my time. That's when we really expanded big time. And so over the course of a few years, we went from 13 properties to 24 properties, but I still had a full-time job. So this wasn't a situation where we even left our jobs to do this. We still had full-time jobs. And it was until last October where I was actually most recently a director at BMO Commercial Banking, where I finally said, you know what? I have to quit. There's a good friend of mine, I don't know if he's in the room, his name's Abdul, but he looked at me, he's like, there he is over there, the man. I remember, so literally what happened was, COVID was over. My VP had asked me to come in. He's like, hey, you got to start coming back to the office. And by then I was used to not going into office anymore. And Abdul kept telling me, he's like, man, when are you going to go all into this business? When are you going to make the commitment? Like, yeah, you're doing somewhat well financially at this job, but when are you going to go all in? And it was that day that I went in and I quit. I quit, and it was the best decision I've ever made. And after I quit that job, obviously Ari and I are doing this full time now. And we also launched Tenants B&B, an Airbnb coaching program with Abdul, and it's been the best decision ever. So that's the story.
Yeah, actually, I wanted to touch on that point, and credit to Abdul over there. There was a moment. It was my birthday just before COVID hit. Sorry, it was 2019, and he's like looking at me. He's like, listen, you got to put your feet to the fire and get rid of the safety net. Go all in. And he was telling me this directly on my birthday and to Sean. But, you know, when you come from a background of like, you got to support you're supporting your parents financially, there's a bit of risk aversion, and you're just like, man, what if it all goes wrong? What happens? Like, obviously COVID hit, right? So that was hard for our business as well. But that actually was a transformative moment for us. Like COVID actually, for me in particular, it helped finally, give me that enough the big enough push where I'm like, things are going to rebound. When travel comes back, it's going to be explosive, right? People are going to be absolutely starved for travel because obviously we're in lockdown. People can't even leave your neighborhood. So that, again, Abdul and that conversation, it really stuck with me and it resonated with me, and it hit me first. And then eventually Sean, when he mentions he came and he's like, listen, he's like, let's meet for a second. I'm like, we met. He's like, I quit. I'm like, you quit? No, you didn't. I'm like, don't lie to me. Like, did you actually quit? He's like, had my talk, VP, I'm out. I'm like, okay. Then I knew right away that was the moment in time where, things would even, quote unquote, 10x from there. So, and things have been great since then.
That's awesome, man. Good story. Through talking to you guys and learning from you guys, these are my Airbnb mentors, by the way. I'm on their testimonial page as a student. So, I forgot what I was going to ask you. What was I going to say? I forgot.
Can I make a suggestion? Why don't
I remember.
Go ahead.
I remember. You really focus on this word niche offering. Yeah. That's like you're like, Tom, like if there's one thing you got to learn, it's this niche offering. Talk to us about what this niche offering is and why it is so important to make sure your Airbnb has this niche offering.
Great question, Tom. I'll say this, when everyone thinks of property management or the industry of property management, do you know any millionaires that are managing properties? No. Nobody's a millionaire managing properties for one reason. Usually they only charge 10%. Now in our business, you can charge 25 to 35% if you have the right niche, okay? So here's what you have to do, or here's what we do. Number one, we only target properties that can achieve at least $100,000 revenue per year. So that's the first layer of the niche. To do that, you might think, oh, I need some mansion in West Van. I might need some super high-end property. No, that's actually not what you need. Especially after May 11th, when Airbnb revamped its entire website. Prior to May 11th, Airbnb was promoting destinations. After May 11th, Airbnb is promoting one thing and one thing only: design. So design is the only niche that really matters. Let me give you an example. You could give me any property in downtown Vancouver. Let's say a one bedroom, okay? That's maybe generating $2,000, $3,000 a month in rent. You could take that same property and generate over $100,000 revenue. Just think about that for a sec. That might sound a little bit crazy, but it is possible. All you have to do is two things. That's it, just two things. Number one, you need to have a unique design theme. So when we're talking about niching, make sure you have a unique design theme. For us, we're not designers. What we do have is an internal design theme. Okay, so let me give you an example. Right now in Kitsilano, somebody has a one bedroom with a Harry Potter theme. Okay, Harry Potter theme. Why? Because that's a niche. What happens when you have a Harry Potter theme? Think about that for a sec. Number one, you're tapping into a fan base. Anybody who likes Harry Potter is probably gonna want to stay there. So that's number one. Number two, it's very unique. It's a one of one. It doesn't matter that it's a one bedroom. As long as that property can generate $300 a night, you're gonna make six figures a year. Like literally, that's how simple it is. Design it well and photo it well, you're gonna make six figures. Any property. You don't have to have a 6-bedroom mansion in West Vancouver to make over 100 grand on Airbnb. You could take a one bedroom anywhere, Kitsilano, downtown, Burnaby, I don't care where it is. Design it well, make sure you have good photos. It'll rank make sure you understand how to rank on the first page of Airbnb, do SEO optimization, etc. You'll make six figures, no question.
Just to kind of touch on Sean's point, so the key here is that if you look at Airbnb's history and the founders, a lot of them are actually design educated type people. So I think the founder, the CEO, he actually has a degree in design or some sort of design based degree. And they care about aesthetics. Like Airbnb is aesthetics and design like driven. They want everything to be beautifully laid out for a guest. They want them to be sold an experience. They don't want you to just create a space where they come and sleep. They don't want you to just have a bed there for the guest. They want you to say, hey, so-and-so, come into my home. Can you picture yourself here? Can you, you have like chocolates on the bed. You've set up an experience for the guest that's going to be really memorable. And Airbnb's kind of moved away from, just like Sean was saying, and again, on May 11th, the big changes were destination, like a city, no, an experience, a property. What is the property saying? What does it convey? So if with that in mind, the emphasis now more than ever is design, and obviously how do you market that design. So on Airbnb, photos matter the most. They're basically your biggest selling feature. If you don't have good photos, which you'd be surprised, even in 2022, Airbnb's been around since officially, I think, 2008, people still take photos on their phones, which is, to us, shocking. So, if you're able to stand out by doing just two simple things, you'll be ahead of most of the people in the space.
Those are great tips. Regulation. It's interesting topic. Some cities do not allow Airbnb. Some do. Some don't have rules. Some do. City of Vancouver, like I said earlier, has the whole primary residence, 165 days. What are your... love for you guys to just take that word regulation, talk to us about more applicable, like, Richmond, Vancouver. What are some of the regulatory stuff around, Greater Vancouver?
Great question, Tom. I think for the average person, they think that they need to do nightly rentals to make six figures or to make a lot of money on Airbnb. This is actually not, in fact, true. You could take any property in downtown Vancouver, Richmond, Burnaby, etc. If you optimize it, if you have a unique design theme, if you photograph it well, you can actually make a killing just doing 30-day rentals. 30-day rentals, not 12-month rentals. There's a big difference. So let me give you an example. Let's say you have a 2-bed, 2-bath in downtown Vancouver, and let's say that property is $2,500 a month, average rent. That same property, if you optimize it on Airbnb as a 30-day rental, meaning you're not violating any laws, you don't need to have a short-term rental permit, etc., that same property can make you $6,000 to $8,000 a month. I mean, just let that sink in for a sec. Think about the revenue multiplier effect. you're doing 30-day rentals. You're not violating any laws. You don't need a short-term rental permit. Now, that being said, let's talk about how to make the real money, which is in the nightly rental space. That's where you make the real money. So number one, everyone in this room can declare at least one property as their principal residence. Okay, so you can, let's say you're in downtown Vancouver, you can either go rent a property, doing rental arbitrage, or you can buy a property, declare it as your principal residence, and for 180 days out of the year, you can do nightly rentals on Airbnb. So as long as you're doing, $300 a night on average, you're gonna make 6 figures a year like I was alluding to earlier. So that's the first way. The second way is you can actually manage other people's properties. Okay, and this is how you can actually infinitely scale up with avoiding all regulations, is by managing someone else's property. So when I say managing someone else's property, as long as someone declares a property as their principal residence, you can come in and manage that property for them and rinse and repeat that cycle over and over and over again and scale up to infinity. That's how you avoid all regulations.
And just to touch point again, like regulations are a good thing. If you guys look at it from the perspective of like, if you have just gray areas and you're dealing with, a lot of uncertainty, that's not fun, right? You fear that the next day somebody might just say, hey, by the way, you're not allowed to do this anymore. There goes your business. So in fact, it's a good thing. Make sure to do your research, call the local city office, pick up that phone, ask about the bylaws, ask about the regulations. And just like Sean was mentioning, there's different modes of business, like business models that you can get into, whether it's a monthly Airbnb, short-term rental, like 30 days or more, or under 30 days. Just follow the rules, build your business around that, and of course it gives you peace of mind, right? That's the key thing about the regulation.
I love that point. I just got to add one more thing. We actually love being in regulated markets for one reason. The more regulated the market is, what does that mean? More supply or less supply? Less supply. So think about downtown Vancouver. You have extremely high demand, but not enough supply. We're talking not enough supply of hotel units and not enough supply of Airbnb units. So if you can legally do this in a regulated market, you're gonna make a killing. That's why you actually want to be in a regulated market. You don't wanna be in a market that's a gray area, that's a free-for-all. You wanna be in a highly regulated market.
Yeah, no, that's a really, really good point. It's just, this city is not regulated. Great, let me go do Airbnb. A month later, councilors meet. We're gonna put a ban on Airbnb. What are you gonna do then, right? When it's now regulated, it's gonna be a lot harder for anybody to. Actually, Yuki is. I gotta send a letter from a friend who lives there, and they're actually tightening up the regulations. I was like, holy shit! Like, I have 2 properties there. What am I gonna do? But luckily, there's like all these different things that are being grandfathered in and whatever it might be. So, something that everybody's probably wondering about: what are the best markets for Airbnb? Best cities.
It's a good question, Tom. Let me frame the answer like this. I don't really think about it in terms of what are the best cities. What I try to do is I can go into any market, and what I'm trying to do is carve out a niche. I want to rank on the first page of Airbnb, following the steps I mentioned earlier. Just having great design, having great photography, these 2 simple things, you'll make money in any market. That being said, to answer Tom's question, I like downtown Vancouver best. I mean, this is where I live. And there's an undersupply of hotel units, and there's an undersupply of Airbnb units. So to me, this will always be number 1. Number 2, the second market that I really like is actually Euclid and Tofino. I'm going to treat them as one market. Euclid and Tofino, I really like that market. Number 3, I'd say Whistler. Number 4, I'd say Kelowna. So that would be my ranking.
Gotcha. Any sort of, because we were talking about possibly going to the island and kind of shopping for land and building our own little unique Airbnb design with like A-frames and stuff like that. And I definitely think there's a market for, like, even in some of the cities that you told me, like Jordan River or something. I've never even heard of that before.
Yeah, it's really interesting. There is a place called Jordan River. It's an up-and-coming space. So it's like the next Tofino or the next Euclid. So the point there is you want to keep your eyes open, right? You don't necessarily have to jump into the hottest markets like Whistler, Tofino, or Euclid to make money. You can keep your eyes open, see where the next up-and-coming market is, where real estate is cheaper, rents are cheaper, and there's less competition, and go into those markets. Once again, if you go on Airbnb's page right now, if you go onto their page, you'll see what I'm saying is true. They're no longer pushing specific destinations. So if you go to Jordan River or you go into the middle of nowhere, frankly, literally the middle of nowhere, but if you have a unique offering, Airbnb will rank you on the first page and they'll push you to their customer base because that's what they want. Think about it from Airbnb's perspective. What is the difference between Airbnb and hotels? Like, what's the difference? Because that's the way Airbnbs think about it. What you cannot offer in a hotel is a cabin. What you cannot offer in a hotel is a treehouse. What you cannot offer in a hotel is a very, very unique experience. That's exactly why if you can offer that on Airbnb, Airbnb is going to push you to the front of their page. And if you go to the front of their page, you're going to see all these quirky, unique properties that they're pushing.
And I just want to actually add one comment here. It's funny, during COVID, the travel trend was to go rural. So we're talking the getaways out of the city core, etc., right? But travel trends have actually now reversed, and people are now coming back to the major cities, down to the urban areas. But I think the problem is a lot of the times, like, you know, Sean's mentioning all these cool like types of properties, tree houses, whatever, the structures, those are great, right? But you don't have to do that. You know, you don't have to spend that kind of money or try to build something from scratch, from the ground up. Just look in your own backyard, right? If you live in Vancouver, you have a nice property that you live in. Even if you have a spare bedroom, right? You could test out how well that bedroom can do by designing it, setting it up, and, you know, creating an experience for a guest and putting it on Airbnb as a test case, right, for yourself. And then try to replicate that model maybe on a property like, you know, let's say the entire home, you were gone for vacation, rent out the entire home, see how it does. And, you know, there's so much opportunity right in front of people. I think people get a little bit excited by the headlines, you know, A-frame, cabin in the woods. But you don't have to go to those extremes to start out. Just start in your own backyard and see how it goes and take it from there, right?
Yeah, I think one of the best ways to source for locations of your next Airbnb is just keep an eye out on the cities that you've been to before, that you personally really enjoyed going.
Agreed.
And like, will be pretty cool to own a place here. And like, there's also a lot of other people that's probably thinking the same way as you as well. But having said that, I read on an article like, I don't know, a couple months ago, that they're planning on building a pretty large-sized ski resort near Harrison Hot Springs. I think it's going to be bigger than Whistler or something.
Yeah, supposedly they are.
I don't think bigger, but yeah, they are going to build a ski resort.
It's going to be a big one over there apparently. But I think that's a really interesting opportunity if you want to get from the ground up, because you got winter, so skiing and snowboarding. You're gonna get a bunch of people. And then summer, Harrison Hot Springs. It's like a great place to be.
There's so many great places around this province, Harrison being one of them. Like, it's crazy to think, like, we literally have probably the most beautiful place on earth that we're living in. And there's, you know, within an hour or 2 hours drive, you can literally go to a beautiful lakefront, you know, get away in the woods and the mountains, and, you know.
Yeah.
Just to backtrack for a sec, because I know we're talking about Harrison, Euclid, Tofino, etc. I want to ask a question to the audience. Just raise your hands to this. How many of you have a spare bedroom? Just a bedroom that's sitting empty. Just raise of hands. Okay. All of you should be taking that spare bedroom and putting it on Airbnb like right now.
If not, we'll do it. Sean's going to come to our house and...
What are you guys thinking? Let's make this money. No, I'm being serious though. Look, you can take your spare bedroom and you can put it on Airbnb. Like I said, when I was doing it in downtown Vancouver, I had 2 spare bedrooms. I was living in a 3-bedroom. The first spare bedroom, $65 a night. The second spare bedroom, $150 a night.
Can I share a funny story about you and this spare bedroom situation?
Sure.
So the moment I think Sean finally came to his senses and said, you know what, I gotta rent this entire place out. I can't do this. He's like, listen, I just had a Airbnb tenant come in with his girlfriend, and you know, they were doing, you know what, until 3 a.m, and I could hear them, and it was awful. He's like, I need to move out of this house, because he was with his girlfriend at the time. He's like, I can't do this anymore, because they had the master bedroom, right, the Airbnb guest, and I started laughing. I'm like, well, what did you expect, my friend? Like, you're running a hotel out of your place. People are gonna, you know, do the business while they stay with you. So that was like kind of like the kickstart to be like,
soundproof the rooms.
Exactly. And I was dying of laughter, but I was like, yeah, you know, that does sound terrible. And then I was like, man, I couldn't imagine like just dealing with like, some people can, some people probably, you guys can be more selective, when you rent out your spare bedroom, you can allow, but Sean didn't care. He's just like, I need to make money, so I'm going to rent it out as much as possible to whomever wants to stay.
My first Airbnb experience actually started in my college days. I don't know if I shared the story with you guys. So my parents at the time were living in LA. I was living in their apartment in Richmond. It was a 2-bed, 2-bath. And I was dead broke, okay? I don't even think I had a car at that time. Like completely broke. So I'm like, how do I make some freaking money, right? And I remember staying at an Airbnb before. So I was like, I'm gonna list my parents' bedroom without their permission on Airbnb and see how it goes. And it went pretty well. Like I was getting this lovely lady from Japan, and she came and she was moving here. She wanted a place to stay during the meantime. She had a daughter, and she actually ended up staying for like 40-something nights. However, the problem was during those 40 nights, I think it was day 25, 26, my parents like, oh, by the way, we're coming home this weekend. I was like, oh shit. What did you
cancel on the guest?
Well, no, I told them someone's sleeping in your room. They're a lovely lady. This is a lovely lady, and she needs a place to stay. She's like, what do you mean she needs a place to stay? Like, where'd you find this lady from? Who the hell is sleeping on our bed? Anyways, they got extremely pissed off, as they should. And that was my first experience with Airbnb. But I did make some money.
Did you give them their cut?
No. I didn't make that. I probably should have.
Shrewd businessman over here.
Yeah. But yeah. Anyways, I mean, look, you guys are awesome. Tons of knowledge, tons of experience. But I really want to open up Q&A to our audience. We are pretty tight on time, and I want to say something after too. So I gotta have 5 minutes. So. Questions. All right, we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6 questions. Okay, so Alex, go ahead.
Thank you guys. This was very inspirational.
Sorry. You can ask Jake. Actually, Jake, why don't you come on as well? Because we have questions for you as well. And you can sit on my chair because I'm gonna use the washroom. Okay. I need to go pee.
Thank you for all three of you. It was very inspirational. So the question for Airbnb that I have is, how do you deal with your crazy tenants? Like, do you have crazy tenants? How do you vet so you don't have them? And if you do, is there any safety, security net, anything?
This is a really great question. So I'll say this about crazy tenants. When I had my first Airbnb and I was listing it for $65 a night, that's when I had the crazy tenants. The problem is when you have a low value offering, so $65 a night, you're gonna attract a certain clientele. Backpackers, in my case, a lot of backpackers are $65 a night. I had a ton of problems. But here's the thing, when you go into the luxury space, let's define luxury as $300 a night or more, you don't really get the crazy tenants anymore. And this is the fundamental paradigm shift. If you try to get into the, number one, the luxury space where you charge more, because think about it, somebody who can afford to pay more money, especially if you're in our category, $1,000 plus per night for a lot of our properties, you get people that are well-to-do, right? You have an upmarket offering. These are business people, corporate executives, etc. They're not really troublemakers, right? What you do need to do to avoid troublemakers is have a minimum age requirement, right? Because you could take any property and let's say you list it for $1,000 a night, but a bunch of 19-year-olds rent it out, they're going to destroy the property. So you need to make sure you have a really good screening process in place. And we're talking just the basics, like collect their IDs, have somebody on your team do a phone screen, call them, talk to them. What's the purpose of your reservation, right? Just very basic things. And the last thing is collect a damage deposit. The thing is this, someone who's looking to cause problems is not gonna wanna give you their damage deposit because they know it's gonna get taken away. So set a very high damage deposit. And I think the cheapest that we set is $750 or $850 for most of our properties. That's how we really avoid problems. Like we don't really get trouble tenants. Like it almost never happens, to be honest. The only time it did happen was during COVID for one reason, because we had to cut our prices. The moment you cut your prices, that's again the backpackers. Just lower quality people start booking with you, unfortunately. So
and just to add to this point, like if you're renting a spare bedroom, you're gonna get somebody, one, maybe two people max, right? Ultimately, you have to set the expectations from the onset. Do your screening and due diligence up front, not after. So if someone's like messaging you, they book your place, like Sean was saying, obviously you have a minimum age requirement, confirm that they are adhering to that and validate that through collection of IDs, damage deposits. But you can take it to a step further as well, and there's, technology you can incorporate into homes as well. So if you want to put in noise monitoring, you want to put in cell phone gathering, it's like there's devices that actually can tell you how many people's phones are in the area. So there's other things you can do to mitigate that risk. But at the end of the day, it's about setting the expectations at the onset. Don't wait until after to treat the issue. Stop it ahead of time. And that's the way to kind of really do it.
Thanks, guys. Kind of two parts, but related. How do you manage, for you, Tom, as well, how do you manage a property that's not nearby? For example, if you have something in the Okanagan or something like that, you live here, and then tied to that, what are the things beyond the obvious, like cleaners and someone who manages your keys and stuff that you kind of have to figure out as you go that might be useful to share that you've learned through experience?
The quick answer is, in every market that we're in, we'll either have a property manager on the ground that's part of our staff, or we'll have what we call a caretaker position. So that person will be in charge of that market. So every time there's a check out, obviously the cleaners go in, make sure the unit's clean, but then you also have the caretaker or the property manager go in and make sure the property hasn't been damaged. If it has been damaged on a very, very rare occasion, they take photos, they send it to our team, we send it to Airbnb, and we collect against the insurance policy. I think I missed your second question.
It's just like there's obvious things like cleaners and keys and magical or
Yeah.
things that you had to learn along the way.
Yeah, this is a great question.
Hot tubs, for example. How do you maintain a hot tub? Because it's a hot tub.
Yeah. The biggest challenge in this business is definitely, from a logistics standpoint, having great cleaners. Let me share with you a really funny story, actually. When I had a full-time job and when I had my first Airbnb, I was doing all the cleaning myself, like no joke. So I would go into I worked at 650 West Georgia in the Scotiabank Tower. So I get to work at 8 a.m. Checkouts were at 10 a.m. Check-ins at 3 p.m. So boom, 10 a.m. I'd be at the Airbnb. From 10 to 3. I would be cleaning the freaking Airbnb. I'm being serious. From 10 to 3 for 6 months, I was cleaning all the Airbnbs myself and then going back to work and work until 10 o'clock at night. Until one day, the Airbnb was so messy and so disgusting. I went into the bathroom, and I'm not going to share the details, but it was a war zone in there.
I have never seen Sean more miserable than at that moment in time. Like, I think literally he probably had like mild depression from like having to clean the units while working a full-time job. This was at the very beginning,
Some serious trauma, but it was at that moment that I decided I have to treat this as a business. You have to get a cleaning team in place. There's two ways to get a cleaning team in place. You can either outsource to an external cleaning company, which is the way we started doing it at first. As we got more sophisticated, we actually started hiring cleaners in-house that work for us directly. And actually what we do now is we provide visas to our cleaners, okay? So we have a lot of Eastern European cleaners. They work really, really hard. And here's what I can guarantee you. When you give someone a cleaner and you tell them you can stay in Canada for longer, with a visa. When you give somebody a visa, they're gonna work their ass off for you, 100% guaranteed. They're so appreciative, and it's a tough job.
And just to kind of add to that too, for the love of God, people, pay people well for what they do, because they are the face of your company. If you think about it, you're not there. They are. They're front-facing staff. So they're probably going to meet the guest, potentially. They're going to be the ones setting the expectation in terms of... And the number one thing guests complain about and care about, above anything else at Airbnbs, is cleanliness. Same with hotels. So if you don't pay your staff well, you get what you pay for. So ensure that you take care of them and you prioritize them and ensure that they feel like they're a valued member of your team and they're compensated accordingly.
Yeah, I just pitch in here. the Airbnb. So I'm actually running the Airbnb myself because I'm too cheap to pay these guys 25%. But I have a really good cleaner. I pay her in Yuki. I pay her about $180 per clean. In Vancouver, it's a little bit more. It's like $250. It's a bigger space. I used a software called IGMS, right? IGMS. It links up to Airbnb, and everything's automated to the cleaner, so that if someone is checking in, someone's checking out, the cleaner gets a text message 2, 3, 4 days beforehand, so she knows. I don't have to tell her, hey, check-in's at this time, check-in's at that time, so she can see all that. You can have a automatic, one of those key, what are those called? Key
Digital locks.
Digital locks, right? To give them a code. They go in, they come out themselves. Have a backup key somewhere in case the thing dies. Then this is a blessing in disguise. My neighbor is a handyman, and he's retired really, but he's renovated his entire property himself. So I knew he's really really good at whatever I need to get fixed. So I just said, hey, I'm gonna do some sort of partnership with you if you're down. He's like, yeah, of course. Like, I'm retired, I have nothing to do. Like, if something breaks, I'm happy to take care of that. So that's a great setup. And then I also have usually install like Nest so that you can. These are small things, but like install Nest so you can control the temperature. If they leave, then you can turn on the temperature to save some money. I think that's honestly it's pretty.
Tom, you should be the Airbnb
passive.
guru.
No. It's pretty good because it's a pretty good business. I just haven't had any toilet, broken or, all these different things. I'm saying it's good now because I haven't had to face all those issues. When those issues come, which they will, I might change my mind. But for now, it's like, how much work does it take? Like 30 minutes a week, if that. So it's pretty good. Okay, yeah, can we cut the questions a little? Sure. Yeah.
Hi. I want to thank you guys, Jay, Sean and Ari, for sharing your story. It's very inspiring. I have a question for the Airbnb guys. So you mentioned there's 3 types of business that you guys do, right? Managing the Airbnb, and then the rental arbitrage, and then buying.
Yes.
How much percentage are you doing per each now?
Yeah, it's a good question. I got to think off the top of my head what percentage of revenue comes from each. As a proportion of revenue, the most actually comes from rental arbitrage, right? So let me give you an example. If you rent a property for, let's say, $2,000 a month, but that same property is renting out on Airbnb for $10,000 a month, that's a 5 times multiplier. Right, but that spread is entirely going into your pocket. Versus management, the standard is 25 to 35%. Right, so you're not going to get a 5 times multiplier on that. The majority of our business is management, though. The majority of our business is management, but on a per property basis, we make the most out of rental arbitrage. So rental arbitrage first, ownership second, management third. So if you want to get into this business, my advice to everyone is, let's say you're broke right now, you have absolutely no money. Get into management first and make a little bit of money. Once you have a little bit of money, then get into rental arbitrage. So let's say you've saved up $5,000 or $10,000, get into rental arbitrage. From there, once you've saved up, let's say $50,000, then go and actually buy a property for Airbnb. So, think about that as your wealth ladder or your Airbnb ladder. But all avenues should ultimately lead to property ownership. Like, that's what everybody wants in this room, I hope. It's to ultimately become the landlord, become the boss, own your own property. So that's the way we look at it as well. And right now we own 3 properties. So it works. I'm telling you, it works.
Hey, yeah, sneak it in.
Should we continue
I'll
talking, or you're like, cut the question?
How big is the team?
16 people, but the majority of that is the cleaners. Yes.
I think, yeah, you put your hand up, yeah.
Before you take over a property, I'm sure you want to know, if I'm going to invest this kind of money into it, how much I'm going to be able to get out of it. And I love the specialized niche idea. When you're doing a niche, how are you able to understand how much you're able to charge or something like that once the project is done out on the market?
Yeah, it's a good question. So the first thing you have to do is you have to do your research. You have to know the market. So there's 2 resources or 3 really that I recommend. So let's say somebody offers you a 1-bedroom, a 2-bedroom, a 3-bedroom, and you're trying to figure out how much money can I make off this property? That's your question, right? Okay. So the first place you want to start is on Airbnb itself. Like literally pull up that address on Airbnb and look at the competition set. So go on Airbnb, go on VRBO, go on Flipkey, go on Expedia, and carve out a competition set of say 10 properties that are similar to the one that you're being offered. Then you'll understand how much money you can make very quickly. The second thing you can do is you can go to a platform called AirDNA. There's frankly a lot of data aggregator platforms, Mashvisor, All the Rooms, AirDNA, et cetera, You have to obviously know how to use them, but the data aggregator websites will tell you how much money a 2-bed, 2-bath in downtown Vancouver can make. A 1-bed, 1-bath, how much it can make. So that'll give you an idea of how much it can make. What's important to realize is you have to figure out, let's say somebody offers you a 2-bed, 2-bath. Are you at the 50th percentile? Are you at the 75th percentile? Are you at the 90th percentile? And where we're at is at the 99th percentile for every single property that we take on. That's why we're able to make so much money.
Well, and quick tip is that if you're getting into ownership or arbitrage, it's much easier in the sense that you get to create the design and set the expectation. But if you're going into management, you have to sell the landlord on that, right? And you do that by saying, hey, look, it's worth the investment because you'll make X amount more versus not doing the investment, right? So it just depends on which path you go down.
Cool. Lance?
Do you guys have any potential suggestions for trying to maximize like seasonal Airbnb properties?
Like in Kelowna market, for example.
Do you have an Airbnb right now? What market are you in?
It's like in the Kelowna kind of big white area, so it's ski in, ski out, but off season is not as busy. So.
Yeah, that's tough because in the off season,
I think most people are doing like monthly rent, like they just go longer tenants, right?
So typically in your market, people are doing long-term rentals. But the answer is this. So let's say you're in Kelowna and you don't want to do long-term rentals, right? What you have to do is go back to what I was saying before. You have to think about how do I sell an experience? Because here's what's happening in a market like Kelowna, right? If you just sell beds in Kelowna in the summertime, you're going to kill it no matter what because Kelowna kills it. But what you have to do to make the extra money, right? So the 99th percentile money, whether we're talking about summertime, peak season, or we're talking about dead season, wintertime, you have to sell an experience. So start thinking, what experience can I sell? Can I target this property to wedding planners? Can I target this property for corporate retreat planners? If I can, what do they need? What do I need to, like, think about what an experience means. Like, just think about that for a sec. So it can be as simple as, let's say you have a deck. You have a house, for example, in Kelowna, and you have a deck. And what you can do is you can set up a porch swing on that deck, as an example. And you could decorate it with hearts and flowers, etc. And you could stage it as a honeymoon getaway. Now that suddenly becomes not just a deck and a porch, that becomes an experience. And you can start marketing that aspect of the property as an experience to honeymooners, lovebirds, couples, etc. So now it doesn't matter as much whether we're in dead season or peak season. Anyone looking for that type of experience, let's say they have a honeymoon coming up in the wintertime and they want to go to Kelowna, they're going to pick your property.
And just one other thing too is that, again, remember, you don't have to do under 30 days. If the market dries up for short-term rentals, do a 30-day term stay, and you'll still make a better spread on that than you would doing a long-term tenant.
Cool. Unfortunately, we're out of time. I really appreciate every single one of you for coming out tonight. You'll get an email from us. And this probably won't be the last time that we're going to host an event like this. I think, who would like to see more of these nights? Make some noise. Woo! All right.